Econ 4.2 Part 2 Fiscal Policy. So the video cut off last time, so we'll finish up here pretty quick. Why does fiscal policy work? Again, fiscal policy works because of this thing called the multiplier effect. When the government spends money, or when the government participates in an intervention, it has a domino effect. So when the government increases its portion of GDP spending, it has an effect for someone else. That person in turn spends money, and so on and so on. This leads to increased production. The multiplier effect can also work in reverse when spending decreases. So here's an example of the multiplier effect from the last video. So just to finish this up, the federal government started out by spending $1,000 to pay a week's wages to a teenager for building trails. Because the teenager spent some money, who then the bike store owner ended up spending money, and the car repair owner ended up spending money to hire a painter, this generated an additional $1,600 on top of the original $1,000 investment that was generated by the $1,000 expenditure. So this is the multiplier effect. It creates more overall demand in the economy. How large are the multiplier effects? Multiplier effects are too large. If a multiplier effect is too large, a change could cause more problems. It could lead to inflation. The government has to be careful when they spend more money to not spend too much money to lead to inflation. Too small a change would not solve anything. But it is important to know this to decide how large the initial change in taxes and government spending must be to effectively fight recession or inflation. So how fast does fiscal policy work? That's another general question. Time lags frequently occur because fiscal policy takes time. It's kind of slow like molasses. There needs to be time to realize there is a problem in the economy, there needs to be time to get a change in taxes or spending passed by Congress, and there needs to be time for the fiscal policy to take effect to fight the recession or the inflation. So this can be a relatively slow process. However, these are still important tools because the federal government is such a big component of GDP. What are the limits of fiscal policy? Fiscal policy is limited because legislation or laws are very tough to pass. In order for a bill to become a law, it has to pass both houses of Congress, both the House and the Senate. The President, the Republicans, the Democrats, and the Independents need to agree on what they're passing. That can obviously get complicated and lead things to like government shutdowns, debt ceiling fights, etc. Because politicians are seeking re-election, this gets extra complicated. In re-election, there's arguments about the debt ceiling or how much debt the U.S. government should have. This is kind of like a credit card debt limit, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in class. And it can lead to government shutdown, which we saw in October of 2013. Taxing and spending changes take time. They take time to implement, and they take time to feel the trickle-down effect. Therefore, fiscal policy, which is government taxing and spending, is limited and doesn't always work as quickly as we'd like it to.